Well, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I first heard about the BAA in 1933-34 by reading that wonderful book, Splendour of the Heavens. I didn't join at that time for two reasons, one of which was certainly valid. I didn't think I was good enough. I couldn't imagine that the BAA would be interested in having an ignorant teenager in its ranks. And I really couldn't see myself associating with the giants of those days, people like Stevenson, Waterfield, Phillips, Crommelin, many others. It just wasn't on. They were in a different world from mine, or it seemed so anyway. The other reason was more practical. I couldn't afford it. The subscription then was 1 guinea. That was a week's income for a youngster in those days. So today, our subscription, particularly for junior members, is comparatively much cheaper. Well, eventually, at the beginning of 1946, after 6 years in the wartime army, being beastly to the Germans, I thought perhaps I might be ready to tackle the redoubtable Miss Lydia Brown. So I went round to 303 Bath Road and rang the bell. Well, Miss Brown turned out to be a most charming and friendly person. She made me welcome, even conveyed the impression that the BAA would be pleased to have me as a member. So I signed up. Well, the rest, Mr. President, has, in a rather exaggerated form, told you about. Of course, originally, I never dreamt I'd ever have the honour of serving as your president, or of eventually receiving this most prestigious award, for which I am deeply grateful. And I hope in the remaining years left to me, however few or many they may be, I can continue to do a bit of work. Of course, I'm rapidly going into the dinosaur class. I'm not quite in the forefront of electronics, computers, CCBs and so on. They've happened a bit too late for me. Those of you who are older will know how difficult it is to teach an old dog new tricks. But I'll carry on with the conventional apparatus, which, in my opinion, still does useful work. You can't do astrometry with a CCD. Field's not big enough, no reference stars. So I can carry on with some of the work I've been doing. Maybe produce the odd photograph or two that's worth looking at and showing occasionally. So I hope the story is not yet finished. Right, well, going back to 1946, the first person I contacted when I joined the association was J.P.M. Prentice, who was then director of the meteor section, because meteors were my main interest at that time. The second person I contacted was George Alcock, and that was a remarkable experience. I fancied myself as a visual meteor observer, but I soon realised that I just wasn't in the same class as George. George started in 1930, so he had 16 years lead on me anyway. And he and Prentice, between them, had already established a reputation for observational technique and accuracy in visual meteor work, which has never been equalled or surpassed. Nobody attempts now the kind of work that George and Prentice did. It's too demanding, really, and as far as visual meteor work is concerned, it just isn't used anymore. But at that time, it was the only answer to the problems of meteor astronomy. Photography was not sufficiently productive to be a really useful technique. Well, as I say, I used to think I'd done well if I went out and observed for 3 or 4 hours. I get in touch with George and he said, oh, well, of course, it's dusk till dawn. That was normal procedure with him. If the sky was clear, he observed. There was no argument about it. Never mind going to work the next day. That had to be taken in stride. And he set a pace of observational enthusiasm that nobody else really could match. Anyway, eventually, I took over the meteor section from Prentice in 1954. And at that time, George gave up more or less meteor work, and I hope the two things were not connected. But he had decided that there wasn't a great deal of future in visual meteor work because A, the Super Schmidt cameras were sweeping the field, B, radar was doing 24-hour round-the-clock observing. And it didn't seem that the visual work could fill a useful role any longer. So he decided that there was scope for the visual observer with persistence in the field of searching for comets. So with his usual diligence, he applied himself to that, and eventually, of course, it yielded success. In one case, discovering 2 comets in 1 week. And he's now got a total of 5 comets to his credit, discoveries. This is equal to the previous UK record held by W.F. Denning. Well, after a time, he, in his course of his comic work, of course, and previously in his visual work, his work was characterized by being based on an intimate, almost photographic memory of star fields. He can look at the sky and tell you the name of any star he can see, if it's got a name, and if not, he'll invent one. He wasn't satisfied with that. Once he got his binoculars, he started looking along the Milky Way and learning the entire Milky Way fields down to about 8th magnitude. Not by name, but by visual memory, recognizing patterns. In connection with his new development in the discovery of novae. Well, this again, with his almost unbelievable persistence, has yielded excellent results. He has discovered 5 novae and an outburst of, well, I think it's 4, and an outburst of RS Ophiuchi. Again, more than anybody else in the UK. It just shows what can be done with single-mindedness and application with not necessarily elaborate equipment. George uses his extraordinarily acute vision together with a large pair of binoculars. That's all. He doesn't even put them on a tripod usually. And furthermore now, in what I might call the evening of his life, and I hope you won't mind me saying that, he's not even going outside to observe. He observes from a landing through a double glazed window and still discovers novae. It's rather interesting that the particular achievement for which he's receiving the medal this evening is the discovery of Nova Herculis 1992. And it was the previous director of the meteor section, J.P.M. Prentice, who discovered Nova Herculis in 1934. I remember observing it myself. So that 58 years later, George follows in the footsteps of his previous mentor, Prentice, and discovers a nova in Hercules. So I now ask our President to make the presentation to George, well deserved, for this latest extraordinary